Hi everyone, I'm Jason Jurtich and this is the Mobile Philosopher. In this video we're going to see a little bit about what are Chromebooks and Google Apps and give a comprehensive overview on why both Chromebooks and Google Apps should take the place of Microsoft Windows and Microsoft Office above all. Mac OS and the things that Apple offer are also probably in second place in this case. But definitely Windows needs to be left aside in relationship to education. So as to understand a little bit of my background, I am working in two schools right now in which I am the Google Apps administrator. And I also work in 4 businesses in which I'm also helping them with using Google Apps. In all 6 of these places, they have clearly seen the advantages of using Google Apps and Google Chromebooks over using Microsoft. And in this video, we're going to underline various elements of why this should happen, both in education, even though it's already happening intensely in that area now, but also in business, so that people can take better advantage of their time, work more efficiently, and be able to reduce drastically all of the confusion and the complaints that many times come up simply because they do not use instruments that are with or integrated with real-time collaboration. So as you can see here, Google has an entire page dedicated to Google Chromebooks. There are various options of these Chromebooks that you can find here. Almost every single company now has dived in and begun to use or create these Chromebooks. And the best one here is the Chromebook Pixel, which Google is going to renew this year, hopefully. But the rest of the Chromebooks, as you go through, you can click on Buy Now or check these things out, and you can see how many that are being done right now or made. And this already gives a first indication that Chromebooks are no longer a child's game. It's something serious. It's something that most major technological businesses are taking into consideration. They're taking it seriously. They're beginning to dedicate a lot of resources and money into developing Google Chromebooks. This year, it's even more intense, and there's more and better Chromebooks coming out. So if Chromebooks were actually just something in second place, something that just a couple places were using, this would not happen. We're talking about millions and millions of dollars dedicated to this. This is something real. This is something serious. This is not a secondary thing. It is not just for education. This is for serious businesses who fully understand why real-time collaboration is much more important than a few extra options that in many instances Windows tries to pretend is more important, when ultimately in this day and age real-time collaboration literally plasters those extra options. So this is the first thing that we can see here. But obviously this video is going to be slightly geared towards education, so we're going to start off with that. If we go to Google's webpage, Google for Education, they start off talking about one of the main important things here, which are Chromebooks. And here they mention that they are using between 50 million students, they have 50 million students to upwards of, in this case, 10 million. We have 10 million students using Google Classroom. And if we go around here and we go further down, you're going to see, this is a bit sporadic, unfortunately. But if we go through, it says 60 million users of Google Apps for Education. So we're talking about between 50 and 60 million users are using Google Apps, and about half that amount are using Chromebooks. So we're talking about between 20 and 40 million students in the world right now are using Chromebooks for education. So we're not talking about a couple of schools here. We're talking about lots of schools and lots of students, to such a degree that now the percentages of who is using a Google Chromebook and who's using a Windows computer in education is drastically changing, in such a way that we have about 53% of students right now internationally using Google Chromebooks over both Apple and Microsoft, which take each of those about 25% afterwards. So we're talking about a drastic change. Just recently in California, about 1 or 2 years ago, we had a massive movement here where iPads were being used in the schools in California. California realized that it was not as efficient as using Google Chromebooks, so they changed to Google Chromebooks, at least in some areas. But they dropped the iPads because they could not channel them as efficiently as what you can do with a Google Chromebook. So before we jump into the particulars of Google Apps and other things, let's jump into what you can do with the Google Chromebook and its options. First of all, security. The reason why our students right now do not touch Windows, one of the main reasons why we do not touch Windows right now, is because of the fact of its massive inefficiency to protect itself from viruses. Whereas Google right now is offering $2.7 million in prizes in regards to hacking Chrome OS. And you can run upwards of $150,000 for just one hack for a team. That's a lot of money. And that's putting your money where your mouth is. We don't have that on Windows. That's something so remote. Windows offers a couple things, but they don't have this security. We don't have to worry about antivirus and using Norton and everything else because of the fact that it's 100% secure. Why would I give a student a laptop that's going to be insecure? It doesn't make any sense. In this case, that's one of the main reasons why we're using Google Chromebooks. We do not have to worry about viruses and things like that. So that's one of the main things right there. Second thing that we can focus on is the fact that we're not talking about just undergrads. We're not talking about elementary schools or junior high. We're talking about universities here. If you go into Google for Education, you're going to see that a lot of people use both Google Apps and Google Chromebooks in higher education. This is not a child's game. And so we are preparing the students for higher education. It is a lie. It is false to say that Chromebooks are only for junior high. If you know how to use a Chromebook, if you know how to channel the Chromebooks, you can use these for higher education. Unfortunately, many higher education centers do not understand how to do this. So instead of saying and admitting they don't understand, they go the short route and stating, well, you know what, we have other instruments that are quote unquote better. And that's false. We can do quite a bit with a Chromebook, and we're going to see some of those options in just a bit. So the other thing that's extremely important in regards to the use of Google Chromebooks is the control that the Google Apps administrator has over these Chromebooks. The reason why in California iPads did not work is because unlike Windows and iPad, there's always a way of moving around the possibility of being able to control the laptops or Chromebooks, in this case, in schools. Whereas Chromebooks, what they offer, the Google Apps Administrator, is to completely and totally control the laptop. That means if I want the students just to see one tab, that's all they see. And I can change this with a flick of a button. We're talking about literally 10 seconds of opening up the Google Apps Admin Console, changing the option to blocking all of the tabs except for one, for example, an exam. And then in 1 hour later, I can undo that so the kids can see everything else afterwards. The kids cannot go around this. They cannot install proxies. They cannot try to go around and do something else. They can only see that tab. They cannot open other applications, nothing. Within 10 seconds, can change in such a way that they only see one tab. And that is something that is a nightmare for Apple and Windows. They have not done this. They have not understood the importance of this. And that is a massive advantage of using Google Chromebooks over both Microsoft and Apple. And this is something that the administrator does not have to do laptop by laptop. I can be in France and my students can be in Mexico or in the US. I can have 2 students, I can have 2,000 students, and I can control all of them with a flick of a button. This is not something that neither Windows or Apple can do that easily, that fast, or that efficiently, and that securely. So it's something we need to take into consideration when we're talking about Google Chromebooks. It is light years ahead of both these other companies in regards to security for the students, both in regards to viruses and in control of the laptops, making sure that students only see what the professors and the school want them to see if that is needed. Obviously, we don't have to block these things. But if some school is using a specific classical exam, yes, it might be important for them to block everything else so that they don't have the problem of the kids jumping in and using plagiarism or they're copying things or whatever. And again, this is not something that Windows and Apple offer to a 100% degree, whereas Chromebooks, yes, they do. What are the other advantages of a Chromebook? We have a battery that lasts around 8 to 12 hours. Most Windows computers don't do that, except for I'm talking about the newest ones. And the newest ones cost 3 or 4 times more than a Chromebook. And that's the other advantage. We're talking about economic efficiency here. The Chromebook can be as cheap as $150, and that Chromebook can last up to 10 hours. We don't have Windows computers that can last that long. We just don't have it. The iPad can go up to about 10 hours, and it costs 3 or 4 times that much. So in regards to economic efficiency, it's absurd to get these other devices when with a Chromebook with $150, I can get a battery up to 8 to 10, 12 hours and not have to worry about it. As well, the startup and turning off times are extremely quick. Normally they go between 3 and 10 seconds. We're talking about something extremely efficient. Most of the time the kids do not have to turn off their Chromebooks. They can just open them up and they can start working. A couple days they have to charge it up, and then afterwards they're off and running again. So that's another major advantage over both Apple and Microsoft. I'm using websites here, full-fledged websites. I can use Google Apps completely and fully, whereas if I use an iPad, I only have partial ability and just a few options in relationship to that. So I get fast turning on times, turning off times, I get complete security, I get complete control, I get a long battery life, I get good economic efficiency with only $100 to $150 to $200 for each laptop that I'm getting the kids. This is a massive advantage, and this is why I will never go back to neither Windows nor Apple until they are able to fix these things. Windows in relationship to its battery life, in relationship to its viruses, in relationship to its major lack of efficiency in regards to its operating system, and for Apple in regards to its pricing and its inefficiency in many areas in regards to the iPad, which they keep on trying to underline is able to take place with a laptop, and which is completely false because you can't even program efficiently even something in relationship to Google and Google Scripts on an iPad, which is absurd. So those are some of the main reasons why the schools that I'm working in right now are working with Google Chromebooks, and millions of students within the US and in other countries are changing to Google Chromebooks because they understand this efficiency. So because of this, we are not teaching the students about how to use Microsoft or Microsoft Word or Office, because those things are really not as efficient as what we're going to see right now with Google Apps. So in regards to Google Chromebooks, we understand now in a very clear manner why there's a major advantage and why a school would immediately choose Google Chromebooks and Chrome OS over Windows and Mac for the options that I've just mentioned. And everything right now is intensely gearing towards this. So both companies that are selling apps and software to schools, they need to begin to accept the fact that the Chromebooks are going to be the way things are going to be. And therefore, their software has to be directed towards this. So now that we've mentioned a little bit about the Chromebooks, let's go to Google Apps. Is Google Apps really sufficiently viable system and way to, instead of using Microsoft Office? The answer is yes. In all of these places that I'm working at, I have not had to touch Microsoft Office for literally 6 years. I have not used Microsoft Office in 6 years. And I have worked in over 10 companies and in over 10 education institutions. And not once have I had to go to or use in 6 years Microsoft Office. It is not true that you need to use that in order to be productive. It is completely false. And now we're going to see some examples on why Google Apps can take the place of Microsoft Office in this case. So if we go over to some examples here, we're going to begin with Google Docs. Okay, Google Docs, which ultimately takes the place of Microsoft Word. I can correct and make sure my students understand what they're doing wrong in a much more precise manner than even remotely Microsoft Word offers me. And the possibilities of being able to share these documents with this share button here with the students and them opening up in 2 seconds and then having it automatically saving everything while they're working is a massive advantage in which they see in real time exactly what I'm doing. And even though Microsoft is trying to offer something similar with Windows 365, with Microsoft Office Online, they are still trying to limit in a major way the options that you have online because they want more and more money. Google has another way of getting money, so they don't need to do this. Microsoft is tremendously dependent upon its apps, unfortunately, and get money. And when they do that, they isolate the community and education systems in a massive way, in such a degree that you get drastically limited options online with Windows 365 and Windows Office Online, instead of putting all the options, 100% of the options online, and completely eradicating what is Windows being installed on a computer, which is what should happen. But Windows doesn't get this, and they're going to suffer tremendously in the future if they don't get the idea of putting 100% of their options online and letting Microsoft Office go as something you install on a computer. It's not the future, and it's something that they need to understand. So right now, Google Apps has a major advantage. I'm able to correct things in such a degree that the students understand immediately. If I go to something and I want to correct it, I can either select the word and immediately put a comment. And we're talking about floating comments here in such a degree that they're dynamic. The students know exactly where these comments are. I can create a comment, make that comment, and the student can actually respond to this comment later on. So you can have a discussion here, and all of this is saved in real time. Every single second, it's saved here. So I can resolve that comment, I can delete this comment. In this case, we're going to delete it. Yes, we're going to delete it. But all of these comments, no matter what type they are, these are suggestions. So when I go into the suggesting here, I can actually suggest to the students what needs to be changed, and all of this is saved in the history of comments within a document here. Every single thing. Everything the student responds to, every single thing the student does is all saved here within the document. Not only that, but if we go to the file system here and we go under what is C revision history, I can also see exactly what each student has done in real time within the document, and what I have changed, what the student has done at what hour, at what minute, and I see exactly what each one is doing, and I know precisely what work they've done. So this is another major advantage that Windows and Apple do not have, and they do not understand the importance of this. And it's very, very frustrating because companies think that having a window, Microsoft Word or Excel is efficient, and it's not. It's much more efficient having these options right now. And I could not imagine offering my students something less efficient than what Google Apps offers me in a school or in a business in that case. So with all of these advantages of knowing exactly what's happening, the students have no excuse for not learning. They have no excuse for not understanding what they need to change. They can ask questions about each correction I have done. Windows and Apple don't even get close to this right now. Hopefully in the future they will, but they don't have it now. So these types of advantages are why a school needs to, we're not talking about optional, they need to begin to use Google Apps and these options so they can help the students more efficiently and learn faster. So that's not just the only thing you can do here. Obviously within Google Docs, you have the possibility of setting up the page in a very simple manner. You can set the margins, you can set the size, all these types of things, the color background, all of this type of stuff. You have the possibilities of all the simple ways of adjusting the text. You have your classical options up here. You have the possibilities of putting links in here. You can put images in here. You can insert images. You can insert links. You can insert equations. You can insert charts. All of these things. You can actually insert a chart that's dynamic, meaning if I put a chart in here from Google Sheets, if I change something from Google Sheets, it will automatically change itself here in the chart within the Google Doc. Something, again, that Microsoft and Apple do not offer. We have the comments here, we have footnotes, we have horizontal lines, we have page numbers, page counts, page breaks, headers, footers, bookmarks, table of contents, all of the things that are essential to making an academic paper are offered here. It is the problem we have today is that professors do not know how to use these things, and that is why they sometimes do not allow the students to use them. But this is much more efficient. I am not saying that it has all the options of Microsoft Word. It does not. It has the essential, and the essential is much more important along with this real-time collaboration in which the students know exactly what's happening. It is 10 million times more important than having a couple extra options. For example, in tables, we cannot make the table lines thicker or thinner. But in this case, I don't want that because we really shouldn't be using tables in Microsoft Word. We should be using Excel and Microsoft Google Sheets for those types of things, because doing a terribly elaborate type of table in Microsoft in Word or in Google Docs in this case is extremely inefficient. And the reason why people keep on doing it there is because they don't know how to use Google Sheets, or they think that it looks better in a Google Doc or in a Microsoft Word doc, and that's false. It is much more efficient if you're going to have a lot of cells to do something and modify Google Sheets or Excel in this case. than working in Microsoft Word. It is simply because of the fact that many people, unfortunately, do not understand how to work efficiently in those programs or apps that they keep on coming back here and doing it here, which is not efficient in any way, shape, or form. Then another major thing that Google has that Microsoft and Apple do not have, add-ons. If you go to the add-ons, you're going to find a ton of options, extra options you can add to Google Docs. We have math. We can actually add graphs and things like that. We can add an advanced table of contents. We can add charts. We can look for things in thesauruses. We have speech recognition. We have mind mapping. We have music notation, for goodness sake. We have everything. We can sign things here. There are tons of options here that you can use to make this more efficient. We have mail merge. Mail merge is not efficient in Microsoft Office. Here I can do with just a couple of extensions and add-ons. It's tons of stuff that both Microsoft and Apple do not understand are extremely important for work efficiency. And here they all are. So there's no excuse in not using this type of thing. We also have things that, again, Microsoft and Apple don't have. If I, for example, wanted to cite something, if I put my cursor here and I wanted to put a citation, I can do automatic citations, something that Microsoft and Apple do not have. If I go into Tools here and I go into Research, I can go into Research here, and I'm able to, here in this section, this area here, choose the format. We always use APA internationally, even though some people use Chicago, but APA is more universal. We're going to use the APA here, and I can look for something. So if I want to look for a goal, for example, I can look under goal for here in Google. Google begins to search for things, and I have a possibility of citing this right there. So for example, if I put the citation right there, it'll go in. I can cite this even as a correction, and we'll put the citation there. And down below, I will have this here. And if I go into page view here and I put print layout, that will be automatically cited in an exact manner in APA format. So the students do not waste time in trying to figure out whether they did it right or not. That is a major waste of time. People waste way too much time in dedicating themselves to being too detailed in citations. We do not learn by doing citations. Citation is not the reason why we go to school. That is not the reason why we go to higher education. We do citations only to make sure that things are able to be found. And if I can do it automatically, it's much, much better. And in fact, my students only do citations in something they can find online. We do not use paper books. We do not use something printed out. All of that is radically inefficient. Because besides the fact that printing is totally against ecology, and on top of that, it's inefficient because we shouldn't be printing something out. If I can share my document here with one link, why should I print something out? Printing something out is extremely inefficient. It is totally anti-ecological. There's no reason why a student should have to print something out. So even though Google offers a possibility of printing, and on Chromebooks you use Google Cloud Print, which means you send something wirelessly to an HP printer, for example, none of our students print things out because of the fact it is not the efficient way of doing things. And in the future, I am helping these businesses as well understand they should not print something out unless it's absolutely necessary. And I am talking about government necessary. If they do something for the government, okay, they can print something out. Outside of that, they should never do it. A business should never ask for things they printed out. Now, one would say, and I'm going to put a pause on here and explaining Google Apps, well, what about security? Let's go back to security. Security in Google Apps is absolute. And I'm not talking about an exaggerated absolute. Obviously, anything can be hacked into if you really try. But if you teach the kids how to make efficient passwords for their accounts and not to share things in a blatant manner, then no one is going to get in a Google Apps account, especially on a Chromebook. Because given the fact there's no viruses on a Chromebook, on Chrome OS, from that angle, they can't get in. People cannot get into a Chromebook because of viruses. And because of phishing, if you teach the students how to make good passwords and not click on things, then it is virtually impossible for someone to get into your account. Now, could Google have something happen to their servers? Yes, but that's a major thing right there. Because it's much easier to get your laptop robbed, damaged, or something else happening to it than to lose a password if you use your head. Meaning if you have a good password and you don't fall into the phishing scams, you're not going to lose your information. Google saves its stuff on various servers. It's not just one server in California, which would be absurd. You have it on various places. And even then, if you did something for thousands of hours, you would want to save that in various places anyway. So I would save it in Google Apps, I would save it in Slack, I would save it in other places. But 95% of the time, and we're talking about on a much higher percentage than what you would get for a normal laptop, it is absurd to save things on laptops right now unless you are completely traumatized about security. Otherwise, saving something in Google Apps and knowing how to use a good password and avoid phishing is more than sufficient. In the 6 years I have been using Google Apps, I have not lost a single document. And that is because not only do I save everything in Google Apps, I would save something that I spent more than 100 hours on in somewhere else. It is virtually impossible. Saving things online today, if you do not fall into phishing scams and you have good passwords, is basically impossible. And on top of that, you have two-step verification. So if you're using those three things, it is basically impossible unless you do something as within a human error that would cause you to lose those things. Outside of that, it's not going to happen. And therefore, the traumatization of having something, you're saving something online, is drastically exaggerated. It is much easier to lose things on your laptop than to lose something online if you know how to use it. And therefore, no, we do not have the students saving things on their Chromebooks or on their laptops because it's less secure. It is not less secure online. It is more secure online as long as you know how to channel it. So, having resolved that question, let's go back here. So within Google Docs, we have all of the major options that we need to present an academic document. And as long as the professors, both in junior high, high school, and higher education, understand the importance of not printing things out and rather sharing the documents, we do not have a problem there. Now, what about plagiarism within these documents? That's another major thing here that we have a massive advantage over both Microsoft and Apple. If I go into a typical document here, and we're going to explain the slides in a brief moment. If I go here and I go into, for example, here in Share, we're going to see under Advanced, these two very special options here, which are prevent editors from changing access and adding new people, and disable options to download, print, and copy for commenters and viewers. Guess what? This option here is not viable on Apple and Microsoft because they have ways around this. But if I'm using a Google Chromebook, the magic of this is the Google administrator can deactivate the possibility of taking screenshots or printing documents. And therefore, if I have this selected on a Chromebook, it is impossible to do anything in relationship to the document or the laptop. Now, obviously, no matter what device I'm using, I can take a phone out and take a picture of the screen. You'd have to be pretty naive today to think that there's an absolute security of not being able to share information in a secretive manner. You can always grab someone's cell phone and you can always take a picture. But the point here being is that outside of that example, that exception, Google Chromebooks and these two options here make it virtually impossible for someone to share their information. It is not possible. And so this goes way beyond the options that Microsoft and Apple offer in relationship to these types of systems. With these two check marks and with the Chromebook, I don't have to worry about kids sharing their information because they cannot do it unless they take a picture, which they could do in Microsoft or in Apple or even in a government office, even in the CIA. If I got in, I could take a picture of something. So it's exaggerated to think it's absolute, but to a certain degree, Google Chromebooks and Google Apps give you the highest degree of security when it comes to plagiarism and sharing information. You can make it very secure with these options. So beyond that, Windows and Apple don't even compete in this area. So we have that option. And on top of that, again, the various options of correcting grammar, of correcting spelling and things like that. There are various web pages online which are excellent for this and better than Microsoft. So for example, Grammarly is one of those. If I go into Grammarly, as an option here, we have Grammarly. This this webpage is excellent in regards to reviewing, revising, and making sure that the grammar that we present in our documents is the best in regards to an automatic manner. Yes, Microsoft Office has an extra option that Google Docs doesn't have in regards to checking the grammar in an advanced manner, but I don't need that. I can use this. And so that is not an excuse to say, no, well, because Google Docs doesn't have this, then we can't use it. False. There are better options online than what Microsoft Office offers in regards to its grammar correction that allows me to have a better document online than what Microsoft Office can offer me in this case. So that is not an excuse. To say that it doesn't have a couple options is not the reason why people don't use it. It's because they don't know. Because I can get a better document corrected in a grammar level, on a grammar level, within these types of applications than I can in Microsoft Office, simply put. And obviously the spelling, that's something that Google has. So if, for example, I put an S here, later on it's going to underline this word, and right-clicking this word, it gives me the possibilities of having options in regards to this. So there's plenty of ways to make sure that spelling and grammar are corrected within these. And on top of that, there's nothing, there is no computer, there's no AI, even though Google and Facebook are working towards this in a very intense manner, there's no AI that can actually correct in a clear and precise manner a written text. And therefore, Google wins in this area. There's nothing better right now. So in leaving this alone, I hope that the options here in regards to Google Docs are sufficient for the ones who need it. If there are some extra options that you need, I haven't mentioned, but I can mention now, for example, numbering and bullet points and all these types of things. If there's an option you think that Google doesn't have, that you say it's impossible, please leave it in the comments below, and I'll be more than happy to respond to those comments or give you an option to take the place of that. So let's move on here to Google Spreadsheets. Google Spreadsheets has about 75% of the options that Microsoft Excel has. Obviously, some of those options, if you are working specifically in finance, obviously this can be a bit limiting. But outside of a very specific realm of finance, Google Spreadsheets offers more than enough options to work within this realm than Microsoft Excel. And on top of everything else, I have the same options of sharing, of being able to see in real time what things are happening. If administrators need to make sure that their bosses understand what's going on, they don't have to download a document, send that document by email, upload, save the document, open the document, change the document, save that, all the long list of things that one has to do. It's absurd. So if we don't share things online today, you're working in a very inefficient manner. You need to be able to do this so that your work is more efficient and more clear, so that administrators and vice presidents can work together in a more efficient manner with numbers and with everything else. And here I'm using it on an education level where I put all the vocab, for example. So I have the entire 4 years here programmed for each semester where the kids know exactly what words they need to learn for the entire semester, for example. And here, for example, I have their grades. I've hidden the names for a case of confidentiality, but every single thing that they do during the semester and during their period is here. It's all automatic. Everything is automatically set up so they know exactly what's happening with their grades in every single second. There's no confusion, there's no paper involved, and it's all automatic, as I just mentioned. And then you have the typical things of spreadsheets, and you say, okay, well, a spreadsheet doesn't do as much. That's not true. I have massive amounts of functions and formulas here that I use, and they work perfectly well. They allow me to change colors. They allow me to do everything that 75% of a normal Microsoft Excel spreadsheet can do. I'm using massive amounts of functions here, and they're pretty advanced. So it is not true that I can't do something equal to a Microsoft Excel worksheet, unless you specifically work in financing. Outside of that, it covers everything. It covers everything. It's not true that you can't use this in normal business. It's totally not true. I'm using letters here, I use numbers, I use a whole bunch of things, and they work perfectly. Changing the colors of the cells, everything works perfectly fine here without any problem. So it's totally false saying that you cannot use this for business and education. It's totally not true. And again, we have the options for sharing, we have the options of viewing in a very secure manner without having any copy-paste. And in fact, for example, I have the possibility of showing the students their grades at a certain time. If I look at the equation here, that hopefully when the internet comes out, we have, for example, the equation here that the answers from this tab here will come out at a certain time here. So the students fill out their answers and then they come back and they can see their answers after a certain amount of time because of the fact that I have designed it in such a way that the answers will come out after a certain amount of time. So they can't copy the answers, but they're able to see the answers afterwards because of this design. So it works extremely efficiently, much, much better than many websites right now in relationship to doing exercises. The students have things like this. If we go back here to the grades here, if we go to assessments, for example, you're going to see in this page that here, each cell here has its own link. This link opens up an exercise, and the second the exercise is done, the student is able to see his or her grade immediately afterwards. So the professor doesn't have to correct all of these things automatically. So here we have the instructions. The students click on next. They're able to go, they're reading a reading comprehension that is equally or much more complicated than what you'll find in the TOEFL EBT. And then they come down here and they have to answer these questions. And this will take the students in higher levels 45 minutes to 1 hour to respond, making sure they've read everything carefully and then responding to the questions in this case. So you can do extremely hardcore exercises with Google Apps and with Google Forms in such a way that the students learn much more efficiently than they would ever learn within Microsoft or Apple. There is no competition in this realm. So that's in regards to spreadsheets. And again, if there's some options or functions that one is doubting about that you can't do here, then I can explain that in our video. But obviously you have data and you have graphs and you have ranges and you have all these types of things that you can do in regards to validation and formatting and all these types of things that you can add to a Google spreadsheet. So that it's totally not true that you can't. The charts here are extremely advanced. You can do tons of things with these charts in a way that is equal to, it might even be a little less, but you get a lot of options in relationship to the charts that is more than enough for even higher education. So you have tons of things there that you can pull out of Google Charts, and you can edit them, you can modify them, you can do tons of things with them. So obviously that is covered as well. So the main aspects, the characteristics of a Google spreadsheet is also offered completely for all the way up to higher education without any problem in this case. Let's go to Google Slides. This is an example of a Google Slides that's public, meaning it acts just like a website that I started from zero, meaning that here we have everything that's basic for a type of presentation that would take the place of Microsoft PowerPoint. All of the things except for adding sounds, which are not necessary for a presentation, are here. So you can change the background, you can change the layout, all of these things are added here. And this is a fine example, which I've dedicated we're talking about hundreds of hours on, in order that the students are able to learn from zero all of the grammar within English. And I'm constantly adding new slides to this so that the kids can learn more. So for example, they can click here to open a new tab, or they just begin. All these things are clickable. You can make massively complex presentations that can be turned into stories. You can do something like this, for example, and where I can click on one, it brings me to that slide. I go through, I see everything here. Down below, I have videos that are connected to YouTube. So I have tons of options. I can go here, click this back. I go back to the index. I can add videos. I can add graphs that are dynamic, which connect to the Google spreadsheets. All these types of things can be added here. I can add GIFs, I can modify photos, all that type of stuff I can do within these types of things. I can modify the sizes of these types of things in page setup. So I have widescreen and I can change it into custom to modify whatever I want. You can even use this as a supplement to Illustrator. That's how advanced and how complex this can get. You can add drawings. So if you go in here, you can add text boxes, you have images, you have charts again, like I said, videos, word art, line and shapes. These things will give you massive possibilities in regards to making graphs and charts and things like that. Very, very advanced types of things that you can play around with here. You just add them up here, throw them around, you can flip them, you can insert them, you can, many options that are equally as good, if not better, than PowerPoint in this case. Again, there are a couple options that are not here. For example, trying to cut a background out of an image. But once again, we have 5, 10, 15 websites that can make a background of an image transparent, and then I can integrate that image into here. So that's again not an excuse. Just because Google Slides doesn't have that particular option that we have in PowerPoint doesn't mean that it cannot be used instead of PowerPoint. On the contrary, it has tons of options. And like you see here, in one click, I can make a Google Slides presentation public, and anyone can see this. And it's a massive advantage over what is PowerPoint, because I have to do a massive amount of stuff to get that public later on. Whereas here, it's just one click. So we have the basic options, text boxes, all the formatting the text you can possibly imagine. You can add over 400 fonts to change the font types and things like that. The sizes are unlimited. Everything that you typically need in a presentation you can have here. So that again is an advantage. And on top of everything else, you have the simple advantage down here of having a laser pointer here that you can integrate so that you can show the slides like that. You can jump around the slides as much as you want here. There are tons and tons of options that unfortunately Microsoft Office has not, and nor Apple, has not added to their suite. So this helps tremendously because the kids can work with up to 50 people on one presentation. They make it very, very well, and they do not need Microsoft PowerPoint. They don't need it for business. They don't need it for education. And that is why we are not teaching Microsoft Office in the schools that I'm integrating both Chromebooks and Google Apps within it, because they don't need it. It is a cultural and social crutch in this case to think that we need Microsoft Office when we do not. And if the kids know how to use this, they will be equally as efficient and as professional in the future as anyone who uses Microsoft Office. So there's no need. And that's why right now schools are doing this type of thing. Now in the future, if Microsoft and Apple offer these types of things, that's wonderful. But right now they don't. And therefore, this is what education needs to be using in order to make sure that it's as efficient as possible. And you can check about the more than 250 videos I have online, both in English and Spanish, that talk about Google Apps in a more detailed manner. So that's why I'm not going to go through them in this video. But it's important to take into consideration that this will easily take the place of Microsoft Office and what Apple offers within education today. If that changes, wonderful, because the point here isn't to be married to or to promote Google. I am not here to promote Google. I don't work for Google. But I understand that the applications that Google offers right now are the most efficient. They're not perfect because Google has quite a few elements that don't work either. But they are offering the best option right now. Hopefully Microsoft and Apple will get their companies moving so that they can do something better, but right now they don't. And so my commitment to my students and the businesses I help have to be into offering them the most efficient option. And right now, working online, as long as you know how to remain secure online, is a much better option than working isolated on a laptop, which is drastically inefficient today, and in many instances can be equally or more dangerous than working online. So it's important to take all these things into consideration when one is trying to offer a program to students in schools and to businesses, because this is going to be the future. It is not an if, it's a when. If a business does not understand that the future is online, that business is going to suffer tremendously. It needs to know how to use Google Apps or the equivalents of what's going to be more efficient in the future. It needs to know how to use social programs. It needs to know how to use chats. Both Facebook Messenger, what Apple is doing with iMessenger and things like that is the future. Commerce is going to be done within chatting systems. It's going to be done online, and businesses and education systems must. It is their obligation, if they want to help students, they must move their stuff online for the students to understand that that is the future. We do them a great disservice if we do not teach them about how to work online. So I hope this is sufficient in order to explain these types of things. If you have questions or comments, please put them in the comment area below. I'll be more than happy to respond to them. If there are options that you feel like Google Apps or similar options online don't offer, I'll be more than happy to respond to those things. But again, I'm not saying that this is a 100% supplement to everyone. Obviously, someone who works in a professional world, for example, movies, is not going to grab a Chromebook and try to do movies. That's not going to happen. And it's similar to other areas. But for the majority of people who are not trying to dedicate themselves 100% to a very specific area, it is absolutely true and coherent to say that Chromebooks will fulfill, in general, 80% of what people need today without any problem and without any reason to having to go back to Microsoft or Apple if they needed to stay in this realm. There is no reason why. So please put your comments down below. I'm going to stop the video right now because if I go any too longer, it's going to be an exaggeration here. But please help me to specify this, and I'll be more than happy to make other videos in the future if you need more specification. But hopefully this was motivation enough to take seriously the movement right now, the change that's happening, and to be able to offer students something better, something more efficient, and something that allows them to really develop themselves so they can work more efficiently in the future and help you as the ones who are watching these videos to be more efficient in your businesses and in your schools so that we can have a better system and the kids can grow. Thanks.